So there was a blaze at the residence of Delhi High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Varma, but it led to the recovery of a massive pile of cash.
Big breaking news that's coming in. The Supreme Court has initiated an investigation into the High Court Judge Varma, at whose residence piles of cash were found.
A very detailed report has now been submitted to the Chief Justice of India. This report has been submitted by the Delhi High Court.
Has now officially transferred the Judge Justice Varma back to his parent court, the Allahabad High Court. Do you believe that this case will be swept under the carpet as some fear, or is it moving in the right direction?
Where are the half-burnt notes? What was the police doing when it reached there? Why did it not make a panchnama with two independent witnesses? How did income tax not come into the picture?
There is corruption in the higher judiciary. Can we say that now with any conclusiveness?
The real way out is to have a structured revamp of these kind of inquiries and the process of impeachment, which is virtually well-nigh impossible.
Are you saying you are not ruling out the possibility that Justice Varma was set up?
I wouldn't use the word setup, but I would say that I am not ruling out the possibility that he is totally unaware or uninvolved, unless these disturbing questions are answered one way or the other. So there are four vital things: open or closed door, if locked, how broken, video, panchnama, witnesses, inventorization, and where is the cash?
Hello and welcome. Mounds of cash being found in the outhouse of a sitting Delhi High Court judge's residence have shaken the higher judiciary of the country and become a major talking point. Allegations of corruption, fixing on one hand, and even suggestions that it could be a giant setup on the other are doing the rounds. The Chief Justice of India has stepped in and set up a 3-member committee to inquire into it. The judge has been transferred, a police investigation is also on, and the matter is now echoing in Parliament. At the heart of this major debate lies the question: who will judge the judges, and what are the implications of this scandal for the country's judiciary? Joining us today on this very special roundtable, Justice Sanjeev Banerjee, one of the country's distinguished jurists, former High Court judge both in Madras and Meghalaya. I'm also joined by Colin Gonsalves, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, who's been battling for judicial accountability for years. Gopal Shankar Narayanan, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, joins us. Orgo Sengupta, founder, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, has done his PhD on judicial appointments from Oxford. And Satyapal Jain, former MP and additional solicitor of India, joins us in his personal capacity. I appreciate all of you joining us. I'm going to come question by question, gentlemen, to each of you to get a sense of why this is such a big talking point. The first question I raise is: corruption in higher judiciary real or exaggerated? Why don't you start, Justice Banerjee, since you've seen it from the inside as a High Court Chief Justice? Is corruption in the higher judiciary real or exaggerated? There are those who have said at least 50% of our judges have something to answer for.
The judiciary is not outside the society. So if there is some element of corruption in society, that is reflected in the judiciary also. I don't think it's 50%. I don't even think it's close to 20%. But I won't be able to give you a figure. But that there is corruption in the judiciary, in the higher judiciary, is beyond question. No one should live in a fool's paradise and say that there's no corruption in the judiciary.
I want to understand, when you say there is no corruption in the judiciary, says Justice Banerjee, Colin Gonsalves, as someone who's claimed that there is widespread corruption, can we quantify it? Is it fair at all to quantify and say there are a number of judges who are corrupt? We've seen what happens when we paint everyone with a broad brush. How would you respond to those who say we are unfair to the judges when we say judicial corruption is widespread?
Well, Rajdeep, when I came into the Supreme Court in the year 2000, we would hardly hear people talking among themselves, lawyers, talking about this judge being corrupt or that judge being corrupt. And now when I listen to some of our very young colleagues, entrants at the bar, who are obviously repeating things that their seniors have discussed in their chambers, I don't understand, and it horrifies me, it frightens me, to see how they are talking openly about widespread corruption right across the country. It's frightening. Now, if you look at corruption in terms of giving cash, I don't know, I wouldn't hazard a guess as to, 50%, 40%. But there's a bigger corruption, and that is the corruption of closeness to the government, where a politician phones a judge. A politician phones a judge hearing a case and says, in this case, do this, do that, do this, do that.
No, 1 minute,
Now,
1 minute, 1 minute.
those
No,
stories
no,
are also
are you telling, no,
And I
1
have a
minute.
feeling.
No, 1 minute. Are you telling me that politicians are ringing up judges because is this based on gossip, speculation? Where is the evidence that a judge has been rung up by a politician? You see, that's the problem. How much of this is real? How much of it is exaggerated?
There's no evidence at all. And there will never be evidence forthcoming because there's no system for catching corruption in the judiciary.
So on what
If you
basis
had a
do you
body
say
of
politicians are
retired
on what
chief
basis did
justices
you say on the show, sir, with due regard, on what basis did you say judges are being rung up by politicians and that's the real corruption?
Yeah, that I'm saying it purely on the basis of discussion that takes place in legal circles. People are talking about it openly. Like I told you, there's no other evidence. But talk by even senior lawyers and others in the corridors of the Supreme Court and the High Courts is, to me, by itself, a very frightening development, a very worrying development for the integrity of the judicial system.
Let me take that then to you, Satyapal Jain, because you have been both a former MP, now you're Additional Solicitor General. I want to get it clear from you. Here is Colin Gonsalves saying the talk in the corridors of judiciary, whether it's in lower courts, higher courts, is that judges could be contacted by politicians. Yes, there could be judicial corruption. There could be fixers out there. How do you see it? Is it real or exaggerated? Have the chickens come home to roost?
I don't agree with him that the corruption or political interference is to that extent. Of course, incidents, reports are increasing now. I joined the profession in January 1980, and during last 45 years I have seen the numbers of cases of corruption, etc., they are increasing. But let's not forget that it is the judiciary which one single judge of the Allahabad High Court could dare to set aside the election of the sitting Prime Minister of India.
So that was 1975. That was 1975. We are in 2025. You are admitting as an ASG, albeit in your personal capacity, that since you became a lawyer in 1980 compared to today, number of cases where judges are being accused of corruption have increased. Do you concede that?
But let's not forget, those cases all put together also, out of 1100 High Court judges, the incidents are 8, 10 or 12. Rumors are there, everywhere it can be, anybody can say I did this and that. And I feel 95, 98% judges are honest. Supreme Court, High Court also. It is few people who have entered here by one reason or the other who are causing this type of, what should I use, shameless actions, bringing the whole judiciary into the...
Do you agree with Colin Gonsalves when he says that there are reports that politicians ring up judges to fix cases?
Not to my knowledge, I have not ever heard of it. If he has any evidence, I think one thing we should also learn now. If we have any specific instance, why should keep it to ourselves, report to the Chief Justice, report to the people concerned, so that the matter can be investigated. Simply saying any person will not make any difference.
Okay, Gopal Shankar Narayanan, we are getting two clear views. One suggesting that this could be the tip of the iceberg, that what has been hinted about in judicial corridors is now coming to the surface. The other, which is that 97, 98% of judges are honest. A few rotten eggs should not reduce public confidence in the judiciary. Where do you stand? Is the corruption real or exaggerated?
Look, I would defer to a large degree with the person who has been closest to the system from the inside, which in my view is Justice Banerjee. I echo his sentiments entirely. I believe that much like we lawyers would know the truth about lawyers at the bar, judges would know the truth about judges, because there's very little interaction that happens between the bar and the bench, at least openly. There's very little that happens except on some official functions and things like that. I believe that the level of corruption, which is financial corruption, is insignificant, if almost as close to 1%, if at all, from what I have seen. And we are all regular practitioners in the courts. Corridor gossip is virtually unsparing about judges primarily, because they are the ones who decide the fates of our cases, etc. You know when there are whispers about certain judges, etc. For example, as far as Yashwant Varma is concerned, I have never ever heard anything negative about him, integrity-wise, ability-wise, competence-wise, at all. So I would go out on a limb and say, in my view, Yashwant Varma is absolutely clean. That's my view.
You're making a huge, you're claiming Yashwant Varma, in your view, is absolutely clean, which
Yes,
will then bring me,
that is my view.
which will then bring me, what was the cash doing? Are you then suggesting right at the very outset of this debate that this could be a giant setup?
Which will then bring me to, where did you find the cash? Because nobody did.
The Supreme Court, sir, the Supreme Court itself has released the video of the burnt cash.
That video is the only thing anybody has, which was forwarded from the Commissioner of Police. But as far as I'm concerned, I have not seen any cash recovery. I have not seen it. Now, as lawyers, we are trained to be a little careful, because we present cases based on evidence. Let the evidence come, let the inquiry take place, let the responses be considered, let the timing, including the absence of the judge from his 1-acre residence where in an outhouse something was found, let all those things be considered. At the moment, I don't want to prejudge anything. I'm telling you my opinion based on the exact same corridor gossip which has made its way to Mr. Gonzalez as well. As far as we are concerned, the level of, to answer your question directly, the level of financial corruption is almost minimal. It's there, but it's almost minimal. The level of political orientation, a level of dishonesty that may come into judgments because of that, may be a little more.
Orgo Sengupta, as someone who's researched this subject deeply, where do you stand on it? Is the corruption real or exaggerated?
So I'm not privy to all the corridor gossip that the previous speakers are privy to. So I may be excused for my ignorance on that count. But I think you mentioned that this may be the tip of an iceberg. I think there is an iceberg, but I doubt very much that this particular example is the right tip. As you were saying, that we must wait for the inquiry committee to come out with its report, because at this point of time, this looks like a case that is, we should not jump to hasty conclusions. Having said that, why is there an iceberg? I think there are some facts that suggest that there is considerable amounts of corruption that exist in the judiciary. The closest we can get to evidence is we have cases such as the case of Justice Ramaswamy, which was an impeachment that almost went through. We have a case of Soumitra Sen, another impeachment where the judge resigned. Justice Paul Daniel Dinakaran, who was the Chief Justice of the Karnataka High Court, and clearly, according to the inquiry committee report by the judges, had encroached on land. So there are many cases where there are recorded facts that there is corruption that exists in the higher judiciary, not just among judges of the higher judiciary, but amongst Chief Justices, and also in one case, the judge of the Supreme Court. Of course, other than that, so that's at the level of evidence and the level of perception. I think the speakers before me have already said it, that there is a growing perception that some judges are on stake, and everyone knows that this perception does exist. And I think it's a sad day for everybody that this perception has only been growing, and it is growing because proactive steps have not been taken, and the judiciary continues to remain under the view that if it kind of keeps, it's like an ostrich, if it keeps its eyes tucked in that things will go away, but things don't go away. So I think this is really a wake-up call for the judiciary. There are rotten apples, and I think it's time to deal with those rotten apples with transparency and not brush it under the carpet, as the Chief Justice of India has to do in this case.
Given all that has been said, therefore, I come to my second question. Is an in-house inquiry and transfer, as has been done in Justice Varma's case, the best way to tackle corruption allegations? Justice Banerjee, to you again as an insider. There are those critics who say, can an in-house inquiry of judges themselves decide the fate of a fellow judge? We've already heard one of my panelists suggest he believes Justice Varma has a spotless record and thereby seemed to indicate that don't be surprised. Where is the evidence? It could be a setup. He didn't use the word setup, that's my word. But do you believe an in-house inquiry and transfer is the best or only way to deal with potential cases of judicial corruption?
First, the issue of transfer. The press release issued by the Supreme Court indicated that the transfer had nothing to do with the discovery of cash at the judge's residence. Having said that, even if the transfer had nothing to do with it, the transfer should not have taken place at the moment. It should have been kept in abeyance till the inquiry was over. Secondly, as to the in-house inquiry, that is the only procedure which is now established for some time, that the Chief Justice of India sets it up, and you have to defer to the office of the Chief Justice of India that he would have chosen persons of impeccable integrity and caliber to get to the bottom of this.
But judges, sir, with due regard, these judges, with due regard, given no one doubts the integrity of members of an inquiry committee, but are they the right people in a case like this, given the controversy swirling around it, given that whatever has been found requires a police income tax investigation? Is this to be done by judges or by police and income tax?
No one is saying that the members of the committee cannot get inputs from anywhere that they want. It's an open inquiry. Now, you know, the service jurisprudence in this country establishes departmental proceedings. So when departmental proceedings are held, when a prima facie view or an investigation into charges of corruption or misdemeanor are taken up, they are done by the seniors in that particular branch, whether it's a bank, whether it's a bureaucrat, whether it's the police. I do not know why the same should not apply for judges. And if there is something which is found, everything, of course, ought to be made public. If there is something which is found and the Chief Justice of India recommends impeachment, thereafter, under the Judges Inquiry Act, there's a separate inquiry which takes place and which is dehors the present mechanism. So therefore,
the fact is, sir, no one has been impeached. We haven't had a successful impeachment in more than 7 decades. The question is, if any other public functionary was allegedly accused of stacking such of cash in their house, there would be a proper police investigation. Why should judges be treated separately?
You've got to realize the nature of the job. In every litigation, there is one disgruntled party. And every day, that disgruntled party will be complaining that the other side bought the judge, or the judge did not know the law, or the judge has been influenced this way or the other. The nature of the job is such that you have to keep the persons insulated to some extent. And that is what the constitutional experts, the visionaries, thought impeachment was the only way. But we also have to have a mechanism now for these things to be inquired in-house and for measures short of impeachment to be taken, maybe within the judiciary itself. When Justice Chitutosh Mukherjee was the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, there were allegations of corruption against 3 judges. He withdrew work from the 3 judges and ultimately persuaded the 3 judges to resign. There have been other instances. A judge in the Delhi High Court against whom there was some evidence was called by the Chief Justice of India and he agreed to resign. So there are ways and means of doing it.
You maintain
out of office.
I take your point. You maintain an in-house system is still the best, given that you believe this is a very, that judges need to be insulated and therefore it has to be done in-house. Do you agree with that, Colin Gonsalves? Should judges have any special privileges that an in-house inquiry commission is the only way to tackle judicial corruption in your view? There are those already who are saying that there should have been arrests if necessary made in a case like this. The police should have acted swiftly, had a panchnama in place, none of which has happened.
See, I don't agree with that at all. In the present case of the present judge, I think I would be very, very hesitant to jump to the conclusion and to, join this sort of anger or whatever against what is happening. He deserves a right to be defended. He deserves to be heard carefully. And he certainly doesn't deserve to be condemned in the manner in which he has been condemned. Having said that, this in-house inquiry, let me tell you, is a knee-jerk reaction. It's cosmetic. It has always been like that, and I don't think there is any interest in the judiciary to have a structured, permanent, continuous system. Because allegations of corruption are made against session judges. They're made against all kinds of judges, sometimes genuinely, sometimes falsely. You need a structured system where they can immediately swing into action. You don't need the Chief Justice to appoint 3 judges as a one-time thing that will come up for some time in the news and then disappear. This is a cosmetic thing again, which the judiciary has engaged in for many, many years.
So what would you suggest?
Something.
No, so what would you suggest?
3 judges.
If this is cosmetic, if this
a
is
structured
cosmetic,
system where you have
done?
a permanent. I'm telling you, a permanent system where the senior most judges form, together with other members of society, very reputed people, a committee, a kind of a body to investigate on a regular basis any allegation of corruption against any judge. Right through the year they'll be investigating. And the police will certainly not be the head of that investigation. It has to be by judges of impeccable repute, mixed with other persons who can contribute to the investigation.
Right.
There are so many. I hear so much. And I'm appalled by what I hear. It can't be, all right, this will come up for a year and will stay in the news, and then we'll go back to business as usual.
But how do you, Gopal Shankar Narayanan, how do we decide that this particular case deserves an in-house inquiry or even a structured inquiry of the kind that Colin Gonsalves is calling for rather than an ad hoc inquiry? Because the allegations are mounting. In the lower judiciary, we hear even more about the case of session judges, district judges. There are even wider allegations. Given all that, can we have a structured system in your view that can be there, a permanent system that any individual, any citizen tomorrow, a whistleblower, for example, could report to this committee and then the committee decides if it's a prima facie case, they will inquire into it? Or do you believe that would in its own way, create even more problems?
I think a major issue is with reference to the practicality of this whole thing, Rajdeep. As of now, we have 2 systems in place. One is under the Judges Inquiry Act, which is where the president will refer it to the houses and there will be an initiation of an impeachment proceeding, etc., if they find that there's something against the man or woman, as the case may be. The second is this in-house procedure, which came out of the restatement of judicial values in 1998 by a full court of the Supreme Court. There is, of course, a third sanction aspect with reference to criminal proceedings, which arises out of the Veeraswamy judgment, which is a constitutional bench judgment. Now, these procedures exist at the moment. I think as a hypothetical situation, it would be ideal to have a structure like Mr. Gonsalves suggests. The only problem is, A, who will people it? People who are beyond any kind of influence, either political or otherwise. B, what will be the level of accountability and transparency there? Will we have everything being put up on a website on a daily basis for the world to have its opinions drawn on it? And C, will there be a challenge process? Because if there is a challenge process, eventually, like everything else, it's going to wind its way up to the very Supreme Court, where questions itself may be taken about the judges who are the ones who are under question. So for me, the idea of a system is great. But how do we build such a system? And one last thing, Rajdeep, just one last thing, sorry. On the lower judiciary, I know they have come under a lot of flack in the past. But I must tell you, some of the best judges we have today are in the lower judiciary. It's unfortunate that this perception seems to be there that at the lower judiciary, there is some kind of compromise that takes place, etc. But I'm very optimistic about our lower judiciary. We have some of the finest students from law colleges across the country who are joining the lower judiciary. And they're all very, very good, very independent. I hope we don't have such a view continuing to take root that in the lower judiciary there needs to be question marks.
Orgo Sengupta, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just on Gopal's point, I think this is not also entirely hypothetical. The Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill was introduced by the UPA government and at that point of time had a fair degree of bipartisan support. The idea behind that bill was exactly what we are discussing and what Mr. Gonsalves said, that there should be a permanent mechanism for an in-house inquiry of this kind. Because the problem is this, today even if the in-house inquiry finds that there is something against this gentleman, the fact is that there is really no power that the Chief Justice of India has to take any punitive action. What he can do is he can recommend impeachment, and that's the only process that can commence. So as Justice Banerjee was saying, that what about measures short of impeachment? There may be all kinds of misconduct that we know have come to light in the last 75 years, which our constitution framers may not have envisaged. So what do we do with that kind of misconduct? So there the Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill did two things. One, it said that there were certain kinds of actions that could be taken. Number one, with stoppage of judicial work. Number two, public censure. Number three, issuing of advisories and warnings. And we can debate these. But there are actions short of impeachment that can be taken when there are cases of misconduct. Second, who is in the part of this committee? And that oversight committee that had been set up by that legislation, if memory serves me right, had a retired Chief Justice of India, a judge of a Supreme Court appointed by the Chief Justice, a Chief Justice of a High Court. It had one eminent person appointed by the President, if I remember right, and the Attorney General. And there was a lot of debate about the Attorney General. But the fact is there may be two views, but we need to have a high-powered, non-partisan body that can look into these kinds of permanent complaints. And, the heavens will not fall. The fact is that we think that anyone can file a complaint and, all this stuff will happen. Yes, there will be some complaints, but those complaints can be screened out at an initial level. Just as a data point, the UK Judicial Conduct and Investigation Office exists. There are 300,000 members of the UK judiciary, give or take a few. The fact is they receive on average between 2,000 and 3,000 complaints every year. And the number that moves on to any sort of they take cognizance of is less than 20 per year. So, the fact is that there are ways and means in which we can do it. And I think this is, again, as I say, reiterate, this is a wake-up call for us to have a constructive debate on a law on judicial standards and accountability and stop this ad hocism that has held the fort for so long.
Yeah, but the question is, we've been talking about this. I remember in the early 90s in Mumbai, even there, we used to hear about judicial accountability and standards being legislated and the creation of a structure. Satyapal Jain, are the politicians really interested in actually fixing the problem? Or do they simply want control over appointment of judges? That's all that they want. They don't want to even get into the real issue of judicial accountability. I don't both politician and lawyer.
Let's understand two things. System, what present is, and system, what do we want or we feel should be reformed or more reforms should come. These are two different issues. At the moment you put that first question, the CGI had no other option, I will use that word, no other option except to order an inquiry into the whole incident, which he has done. And all the three members, two of them are from my region, the Chief Justice of Punjab Haryana High Court, another Honorable Judge, Chief Justice of Himachal High Court, whose father was also a Judge Chief Justice, who was in my High Court before he was appointed, a man of unimpeachable integrity. So he had no other option except to order an inquiry. So far as the other options are concerned, the Chief Justice has already ordered withdrawal of the judicial work from the Honorable Judge, which practically amounts to suspension of the judge. He will not be doing any judicial work. Transfer can be an issue of opinion. Somebody may say he should have been transferred. Somebody may say he should not have been transferred. But the question that you have put, it's not the question of politicians. I think it is a high time when we should rise above our political consideration, our party consideration. It's not a confrontation between judiciary, legislature and executive. The issue has come that such type of glaring incident where crores and crores of rupees are seen burnt at the residence of the house, and the defense given by the honorable judge. You might recall, you have been doing that story when Sukhram's residence was raided and about 2 crores were recovered. The same defense was given by him also. I don't know who has kept it in my residence.
So you are more inclined to say that the judge has more to answer for. Am I correct? You are saying the judge can't. You believe that the judge has much to answer for. He cannot get away by saying, I don't know who's kept it there.
I say, forget about that. This much amount you can't, even a normal man cannot have at his residence. From where this amount has come? And his defense is not that it is my money. Could be you have sold your land, you have purchased something, the amount is mine. His defense is practically the same, which was that of Mr. Sukhram when his residence was raided in somewhere 92, 93. All people whose amount is recovered, they say, it's not my amount, I don't know who has left it. As if people want to just leave amount at their residence.
Gopal Shankar Narayanan, as someone who's saying that Justice Varma, you believe is clean, you're hearing Satyapal Jain saying that, that the defense is not quite working. To say, I don't know who put the money there is a rather poor defense, he says.
The major difference is that in Sukhram's case, they found the money. In this case, there is no money. Let us have the inquiry go on to its conclusion. Let us not prejudge anything. The in-house inquiry system permits them, and they have, as you've seen in the media itself, get the help and service of police investigators, etc. They'll obviously take a look at the CCTVs. They'll look at the speed cameras, which are on all the Lutyens Delhi roads, to figure out ingress and egress of cars, phone calls.
No, so if it is found, if he is found to be guilty, you're very clear he should be arrested then and treated like any other common Indian citizen?
I believe the system should follow its way to its due course. The due course with reference to an in-house inquiry is not arrest. With reference to an in-house inquiry, Chief Justice Sanjeev Khanna has 3 options. The first, in case there is a complete exoneration, he just submits the file and leaves it as it is. Second, if there is a finding of guilt, he usually calls up the judge, gives the judge an option of resigning and ending matters there. If the judge says no, it goes to the third option, which is sending it to the executive, so impeachment proceedings are initiated. That's
yes,
the process.
but beyond that, it is also, as I say, he is at the end of the day, he may be a judge, but a citizen. If it is found, and it's a big if it is found that there is guilt prima facie, it should be the subject of a criminal investigation. Justice Banerjee, are we clear about that?
Absolutely. Judges are amenable to the Prevention of Corruption Act, and a judge who is prima facie found to be guilty after an in-house inquiry should be subjected to the law of the land like any other ordinary citizen.
Okay, that's very clear. Let's use that to turn to our third question, therefore, Justice Banerjee. Does the Collegium system of appointing judges work or not? Should judges be appointing fellow judges? You're already hearing from politicians who wanted the National Judicial Accountability Commission to come in place, the NJAC. They wanted the NJAC to include both politicians and judges in the appointment of judges. Do you believe that's a better system, or the present Collegium system where the judges appoint their own is better?
First and foremost, Rajdeep, we must not use this as an excuse to dismantle the Collegium system. If the Collegium system had not been put in place by interpreting the Constitution, the Supreme Court and most of the higher judiciary would today have been completely destroyed and taken over by politicians. The independence of the judiciary must be maintained, or else nothing is left of democracy. Now, the Collegium system is not perfect. It must be bettered. The political executive of the day has to be given a say. But the primacy must always remain with the Chief Justice of India. There should be a framework developed in the lines of the judgment in the NJAC case, where the primacy remains with the Chief Justice of India, but the process of consultation with the political executive continues. Now, what I've heard over the last few days in shows like this, that today the Collegium system has adopted a completely different methodology. If you go by the Supreme Court judgments, the Collegium is supposed to recommend and then obtain a response from the government. But today what is happening, and as several former Supreme Court judges have said, today there is a backdoor kind of discussion which is going on, and only those names which are pre-cleared by the government are being recommended. Now that is not what the collegium system is supposed to be. But if you
you're saying something very serious. You're saying you're saying only those judges who are pre-cleared by the political executive are becoming judges, and that's happening behind closed doors and undermining the collegium system.
Yes, you can look at several of the programs, and I've heard at least a couple of former Supreme Court, very senior Supreme Court judges say this.
Right.
It should be an upfront process, and a list which is given by the collegium should not be tinkered with. You either follow the list or you come back to the collegium and say what is wrong with one name or two names or all the names on the list. You can't pick and choose one out of that and disrupt the entire process of seniority that is envisaged by the Supreme Court Collegium while submitting that list. So therefore, it has to be a much better system, much more improved system. Some memorandum of procedure was kind of tentatively prepared. That has to be improved, and the collegium system needs to be bettered, but with primacy always with the Chief Justice of India and the political executive having a say.
You know, Satyapal Jain, what I just heard is what again is said by a number of judicial officers off record, that particularly in the last few years, the political executive only wants judges who will fit in a particular either ideological or political framework. So certain judges have not been able to enter the Supreme Court simply because there is a veto. The political executive is exercising a veto in a way over the collegium system. You have to pre-clear appointments.
I have to make two submissions in reply to that question. Number one, I feel that there should be effective coordination between the judiciary as well as the executive in the appointment of the judges. I have seen during the last so many years after the introduction of the collegium system, by and large, it is the view of the collegium that has prevailed. There could be difference, one or two issues which could differ. You remember one of the cases where the collegium had also agreed, the executive had also agreed, his name had gone right up to PMO. He was a session judge from UP who was to be promoted, and ultimately some information came which was against the appointment, and everybody agreed don't appoint. I'm saying two things. For about 35-40 years, we had one system where the executive used to appoint judges in consultation with the chief judge. That system was there for 35-40 years. This system also produced people like Krishna Iyer, Justice Khanna, Jagmohan Lal Sinha. Then came the collegium system. For about 35-30 years, we have the collegium system, which has also produced very eminent judges. Now everybody agrees that collegium is also not the best. The earlier was also not the best. Now why not to try a third system also, National Judicial Appointment Commission? It also has the overwhelming dominance by the judiciary, senior most judges, Chief Justice. Simply because law minister is there, it doesn't mean that he will influence everybody.
Sir, I think the worry is the political executive, being the kind of domineering political executive in the times that we have, will try and exercise veto. They've already done it. I can give you a couple of examples of how the executive has prevented some very capable judges from entering the Supreme Court only because the government of the day did not like their seemingly political position. That's the worry. Colin Gonsalves, do you believe that the collegium system has outlived its utility?
It's not outlived its utility, but I can agree with the sentiments that is totally opaque. In large part, it has been supine to the executive, and the lack of transparency is shocking for an institution that lectures everybody on transparency. And this enunciation that the decision of the collegium shall not be called into question in any court is awful. Now look at the South African system by contrast. A judge applies. Even the Supreme Court judge and the Constitutional Court judge who wants to be a judge applies. It goes on the website. People are given a chance to react, and they can bring out all the faults or good points of the judge. And after all that is collected, then a body of jurists and government people and so on. They come together, take all this feedback and choose the person. But I think the judiciary itself is not interested. In the judiciary itself, the level of people, the percentage of people who are more loyal to the government than to the constitution is rising in every court. You go to the high courts and ask your friends, how many are pro-government and do what the government says should be done? And how many are independent? And look at the number of independent judges, fine, good judges. And their only fault was that they were independent of the executive. They would not take orders from the executive. And they're out. They're out in the wilderness. That's the tragedy of our collegium system. And I don't see any change happening in the near future.
Sengupta, given the contrasting views expressed, you've done your PhD on this. Is there a better system to the Collegium system, or is it the best system that we have?
I think the NJAC was a better system than the Collegium system. My views on this are clear. The Collegium system, when it came to 2014, was a discredited system. It was a system that, as Mr. Gonsalves rightly said, was a shockingly opaque system. No one knew why someone was being appointed and why someone was not being appointed. It was done with all good intentions by Justice Varma, the Chief Justice of India at that point of time. But it's something that has not worked out the way in which it ought to. And I think this is at least one issue where actually everyone agrees on this, that I think that the Collegium has deep faults, and the very purpose, which was that it would be a bulwark against the executive, is a purpose that is not being served. So actually I'm delighted by the fact that we are having a debate or a revival of the NJAC, because it seemed actually that over the course of the last few years that debate was dead, because the judiciary and the executive had reached some kind of understanding in many issues. And the fact is that while the judiciary and the executive, of course, needs to be on the same page with regard to appointments, it needs to follow a transparent process. What Justice
but transparency is one thing, independence is the other. Will a National Judicial Accountability Commission result in independence if the law minister and his or someone from the government is sitting on the appointments?
So I think this is a complete mistake to think that the presence of one law minister with 3 judges, including the Chief Justice of India, and 2 eminent persons who are appointed by the Chief Justice, Prime Minister and leader of the opposition, one law minister sitting there is going to now imperil the entire process. Do we really think that our Chief Justice of India is so supine?
No, we don't know who those two eminent persons would be.
This is all speculation. See, this is all speculation as to who those eminent people are. I was there in court when this debate was happening in court, where someone said, what if that eminent person is Amartya Sen? Someone else said, what if it is Akshay Kumar? This is a speculative debate, and I think it's best we don't have this. But the fact is, structurally, even if we were to make a few tweaks to that system, I agree with what Justice Banerjee is saying, that there should be primacy to the judiciary. 3 out of 6 members was primacy, in my view, because it needed a majority. But even if we were to say make it 4 out of 6, make it 4 judges, keep the law minister, because the government needs to have a seat at the table. Because if the government does not have a seat at the table, then it has a phone call. So let's be clear that a seat at the table is better than a phone call. And have one eminent person. If you think this eminent person is going to be compromised, then have one eminent person and not 2. For God's sake, have a system that works and not continue with this collegium.
Okay, now last 10 minutes, I want to therefore bring 2 questions together. Is there enough accountability in our judiciary? And what will it take to restore public confidence in the judiciary? So is there enough accountability, and what will it take to restore public confidence in judiciary? Gopal Shankar Narayanan, wherever we stand on Justice Varma's case, and it would be unfair to presume guilt at this stage, innocent till proven guilty, but there is a lack of public confidence in judiciary. How do you restore it? And do you believe there is enough accountability in the system already?
Rajdeep, I think a lot of it has to do with how far we have come. I think we started off with a very strong executive-oriented appointment process and very little transparency at that stage. We moved to what I believe was a better system than a pure executive system, which was the Collegium system, which has slowly taken baby steps toward certain amount of transparency. Now, there has been criticism both ways, I'll be honest, where judges have not been considered for judgeship, or they have not been considered to be brought to the Supreme Court, or they've been considered to be transferred, and you put the minutes of those Collegium meetings up online. It has made a dent as far as those judges are concerned. So sometimes there is a question, should you have been that transparent about that? When you select, there is also transparency, but perhaps some parameters which may not be overly relevant, like a minority community person or person with a particular gender.
How do you restore public confidence? How do you restore public confidence? Given that there are people out there today seeing those wads of cash, whether they are real, whether they are fake notes, all of that will be the subject of investigation. How do you restore public confidence?
I think a large part of it, Rajdeep, to be honest, and if you can take it with the greatest candor that I am mentioning this, has to come from the side of the media. I think the media, and I'm not including you among that, but you do know all the media that I'm referring to when I say this, that if you have evening talk shows where in the most strident tones people scream at each other about how the judiciary has fallen, about how all judges are under question marks, then I think there's a big role that is being played, which is causing a damage to the judiciary. So some part of that restoration has to come from there. Another part of the restoration has to, of course, come internally from within the judiciary. I agree that we need to have some sort of system that inspires some sort of confidence. And like Orgio mentioned, both the earlier structure, which has to be in place for their accountability, as well as something similar to the NJAC structure, would be ideal ways of sending that message out. However, I believe some of these bodies should be manned by more than, say, 15 or 18 people. So you keep it as broad-based as possible with representatives from across civil society with a selection process which can properly be scrutinized. I think those kind of steps would send the right message out.
Colin Gonzalez, how do you restore public confidence in the judiciary?
I can tell you, when I joined the profession, the cases of the poor were center stage. Dalit cases, tribal eviction from forest, slum dweller demolition cases, workers' cases, environmental law, they were center stage. Public interest litigation, good public interest litigation was center stage. But with time, all that changed. And today, what's priority number one? None of the cases of the poor are priority number one. They are at the bottom of the list of priorities if you go to the registrar. What is top priority? Commercial cases, insolvency cases, arbitration cases. Chief Justice is dealing with arbitration cases from morning to afternoon. Where are the cases on human rights? Where are the cases of the poor? So the Dalits are fed up. They've gone out of the legal system. The poor have gone out. Slum dwellers have no hope in the Supreme Court. The working class has got no hope. Environmentalists have stopped litigating because your court is not interested in cases regarding the masses of India.
Give me the solution.
You will never get that. The solution, Rajdeep, is for the judges, and society will come to such a crisis level that society will communicate to judges. We don't have faith in you. We loved you once upon a time. We respected you once upon a time. Now we have lost faith in you. In fact, it's even worse. We dislike you because you are part of our oppression. When that comes up in society by some kind of uprising of people, that's when the judges will realize they must change their attitude. It's a ship at sea.
That is not
without
going
a
to be
rudder.
easy. That won't be easy, given that there are entrenched interests. If you're saying that a large group of people feel angered and out of the system, Satyapal Jain, as someone who's an insider, how do you restore public faith in the judiciary?
I have to make 3 points. Number one, let's not find out a remedy which is worse than even the disease. Two, the need for judicial reforms is now getting wider and wider. All agree, you may have one view or the other, that time has come for thinking the judicial reforms more seriously, including the working of the courts. Third, internal mechanism within the judiciary, where they can check up all such incidents, should be effectively strengthened and effectively implemented. Fourth, last point, those who are working honestly, sincerely with commitment, judges, should be given all protection. Nobody should be allowed to raise finger against them simply because you have lost your case there or they are not entertaining you. At the same time, black sheep like the present one, strict possible action should be taken against them so that it gives a signal to the other such people also, and people all people come to know that look here, jo karega so bharega, tu kyun bhayo udas, action will be taken against them, those who are found guilty.
Okay, you're saying visible action against those who are found guilty is a way to restore confidence. Justice Banerjee, how does one restore confidence in the judiciary? How does one ensure greater accountability?
One, the declaration of assets should be mandatory. Two, and I've always believed this, a good judge may not be a good manager. The efficiency level has to be raised. And there should be a judicial management system and a judicial audit system which will look into the assets and report to a kind of a structured body which is in place to look into the allegations after sifting through the grievances. Secondly, our disciplinary bodies, judges come from the bar. Judges are lawyers first. Why have we destroyed these bodies which control professionals? Our Bar Council of India is completely politicized. Our Chartered Accountants body, Medical Council, these have been robbed of their legitimacy. If you had proper disciplinary bodies, then fixers and those who get fixed can be controlled by these bodies. At least the fixers can be controlled.
No, so you are saying there are fixers. Justice Banerjee, you believe there are fixers out there, right?
Of course there are. Of course there are. Let's not hide behind all this. There are fixers and there are people who get fixed. And most importantly, I'm very happy with what the blooded additional solicitor said, that, we must look beyond party. His sagacity is speaking. We must look beyond party. It's a system that we are talking about. We can't have immediate interests or party interests in mind. The system has to be given a degree of respectability and legitimacy so that it is acceptable. The faith has eroded a bit, but still the people look up at the judiciary as the last resort. Your profession, Rajdeep, that requires also to be corrected, as we do.
That is another debate. The debate on the media. All of those. The debate on the media is another debate. I will get you on that, since you were also a former journalist. I can tell people long before Justice Banerjee became a judge, a lawyer and a judge. He worked in the Telegraph in the 1980s. But I want to bring Orgo Sengupta to conclude this. Orgo, you've heard various viewpoints. Is there a magic bullet out there to restore public confidence in the judiciary? We've talked about potential fixers, and we don't know whether those fixers will also get arrested. It's one thing targeting the judge. What about all these fixers who are out there across many courtrooms? Given all of that, your final word, what will it take according to you?
I think the Supreme Court has always been good historically in turning challenges into opportunities. Even when it was faced with the emergency and its lowest ebb, it turned it around with the spate of public interest litigations that it took up. So I hope that the Supreme Court plays this on the front foot and takes this challenge and makes it an opportunity in the following way. Number one is the biggest problem that erodes public confidence in the judiciary is not actually what we are discussing, but is actually pendency. Their cases don't get heard unless you're a rich litigant. So the fact is that the Supreme Court needs to make administration efficient. It needs to professionalize it. Both the Supreme Court as well as the High Courts should think of getting professional CEOs instead of appointing district judges as registrars. It's unfair to those district judges to appoint them as managers of an institution. It requires a professional CEO, number one. Number two is that we need to think about a judicial, and I'm summarizing the views of broadly what I've heard here. We need to think about some version of a judicial appointments and an accountability commission, which is broad-based, bipartisan, and maintains judicial primacy. This will ensure that appointments happen in a transparent manner, and also complaints, and many complaints will be frivolous, are dealt with effectively and fairly, so that every time there is a situation of this nature, we are not again left scrambling with an in-house procedure and FIRs being filed and so on. I think both the judiciary and the government need to both think about this not in terms of us versus them, but need to think about this as institutions of government that are meant to serve we the people.
You know, those are fine words. Gopal, you want 30 seconds quickly?
Much shorter than that. In the last 10 years, one of the finest judges that the High Courts have ever had, and who didn't come to the Supreme Court for reasons best known to others, is sitting on your panel, Justice Banerjee. We longed for him to come to the Supreme Court. That did not happen, unfortunately. But by far, I think one of the finest candidates we ever had in the country. I was fortunate to appear before him in the Madras High Court.
He in fact was transferred from the Madras High Court and sent to Meghalaya, presumably because he had spoken out in a manner that people in the establishment did not like. Given all of that, Justice Banerjee, let me give you the final word. Do you live in hope that things will get better, or do you think things will get worse before they get better? Will things get worse before they get better?
I live in hope. We have some brilliant people as judges in this country, even at the highest level. I live in hope we can bring about create a body which will be a permanent body, like several others have suggested. And I am always hopeful that we'll see more accountability, not only in terms of integrity, but accountability in terms of output, which is equally important.
Right. Well, there's another debate to be had on judicial delays and administration of justice and all the other critical issues that affect our judiciary. But that it's taken an incident, a shocking incident like this, of those images coming of wads of notes at a judge's house, for us to debate this, is perhaps a reflection on the state of the media that debates Hindu-Muslim issues night after night on primetime television, but doesn't debate the real issues that confront our institutions in a democracy. Let's remain hopeful. Umeed pe duniya kayam hai, as they say, and let's hope that this incident triggers a wider debate on how to ensure judicial accountability and restore public confidence in the highest judiciary of the country. To all my guests, thank you very much for joining me on this special roundtable. And to you, the viewers, thanks for watching. Namaskar, Jai Hind.